Hey guys, welcome to Lea-DUH-ship with Lisa-Renee. Let's check out these employee concerns.
So I had a situation where I had to call off of work. I called off work sick because on my way to work, I was leaving out and I realized as soon as I got to the car that I didn't have my keys on me. Turns out I locked myself out of the house and my keys were inside of the house. So I had to call my girlfriend. She had to, sneak away from work. Luckily, she had a time and she wasn't too far away because she was out in the field. So she was able to come. But by the time she came and unlocked the door for me, it was just a lot going on. It's just been a stressful situation going on. I explained to my boss earlier, within the last few weeks, how there was just a lot of family situations going on. I had a very close family member who was in a really bad car accident, and completely life-changing event. We were dealing with stuff and closing the deed on my parents' house. And so that was very stressful. And not all of us, as far as siblings and beneficiaries, were on the same page. So I explained this to her, the whole thing. She knows the whole situation. So when this kind of happened, it was just one of those things where I was so overwhelmed and I just knew I wasn't going to be in a good space by the time that I arrived at work. I just knew it wasn't a good space for me. My mental health had really taken a toll. I wasn't in a very good space. I was about to have a breakdown. So to avoid doing that and taking that on other people and bringing my problems to the workplace, I called my boss and she never answered. So I left a message and went ahead and took a sick day for that day. Well, she never responded. Over a week had went by, and when the pay period was about to close, I received notification that I wasn't able to use sick time, this was going to be coded as, unscheduled time. And I was like, I didn't understand. So I called a couple times. She didn't answer. Finally, I sent a couple emails. She sent me like one-word responses. And finally, when we did get on the phone, her whole tone was just very lackluster, very accusatory, as if I don't come to work every day and do a good job. I'm very respectful. I always keep an open line of communication. I'm always very open regarding my whereabouts and the job that I do. And I just felt it was very dismissive, very accusatory. I didn't feel like there was a lot of support. I didn't feel like she really accepted my side of the situation and really just didn't really care. If it was something that didn't affect her, it was just something that she wasn't concerned with listening to. And so it didn't make me feel very supported at all. It made me feel like I was, her tone was very condescending, very belittling, and it didn't make me feel like I had a whole lot of support. It didn't make me feel like it didn't motivate me to want to come in and do a good job, to do myself a good job, to make her numbers look good, only for her to turn around and reward me with my hard work by accusing me of trying to avoid work or that it wasn't a good enough excuse. Mental health, that qualifies as a sick day. It should. It's part of my mental health. If I was physically sick, then I'd be able to use that. If I had to go to a doctor's appointment, I'd be able to use that. Mental health is part of health. That's why there's the health after the word. And I just didn't feel like she took a lot of time to really feel and support me and not only where I was coming from in the situation, but just overall her whole empathy around the situation has been very lackluster. It's been very, very unsupportive. It's as if none of this matters. And being around me for years and knowing the relationship I have with my family and all these things, it just didn't feel like I had a lot of support. I didn't feel that she was very empathetic to my situation. I feel like she was accusing me of trying to avoid my job when I've never been written up. I've never had a situation where any of my PTO time has ever been in danger of being used. I have plenty of sick time on the books. I have plenty of vacation time. I show up and work. So I just didn't feel very supported. I didn't feel like she was doing a good job at leading us and managing us. And it made me feel very, very defeated. And I'm very, very unhappy about that situation.
Guys, if you have had a similar situation like Andy's concern, drop a comment, tell me about that situation, because I can tell you I've had a situation like that in my career. And the reason why I am so passionate about employee rights as well as leadership development is because I know exactly how it feels to be on the other side of the track as an employee who is not being treated fairly. And I really do believe that some of us are gifted to be leaders, but even though we are gifted to be leaders, it doesn't mean that we don't need to develop that muscle or that skill set or that type of trait. I mean, if I go all the way back, I used to have a dance group called Unique. And back then I was scheduling rehearsals, doing choreography, booking us shows and things like that. So that leadership skill set has been with me for a long time. And then I got my first job at Burger King. I became a team lead and then became a manager over the store. So you can see it's a part of me. And then I started to work for Verizon Wireless, started as a supervisor, and then I just continued to move all the way up before retiring as a director. So leadership is a part of who we are, but we need to develop that muscle. And so today, after hearing Andy's concern, the thing I want to talk about from a development standpoint is active listening, right? So when I hear his concern, the first thing that reads out to me, there was a car accident. But not so much that there was a car accident, but it was a life-changing event tied to that car accident. So from an active listening state, I'm like, wait a minute. From an active listening standpoint, I'm thinking, okay, this is something very, very critical. Very, very critical. So as a leader, when you hear that, you want to really act with caution because we don't know if this person is like on their last leg of living, because he did say it was a life-changing event. We don't know if this person is maybe paralyzed. So if you hear that, don't just hear the car accident. The active listening is there. It's a life-changing event. And because it's a life-changing event, whatever is going on with the person that was in the accident is going to impact your employee. So I would say tread with caution. He also mentioned deed, and I go, wow, signing the deed on a home and the family not on the same page. So from an active listening standpoint, let's connect the dots. Life-changing event, family not on the same page, deed. So if you think about that from an active listening stage, you might even come up with, there's death somewhere. There is death somewhere. So I'm really thinking, oh my God, I have to really, 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 really err on the side of caution. He also mentioned having a breakdown. Anytime you hear those words, breakdown, you really got to be mindful of your approach. He talked about his mental just not being in a really good space right now, and that what he did not want to do is bring his issues to the workplace. And I appreciate that, because sometimes we try to push and push and push and push ourselves. And if you're already in this mental capacity, you could truly hurt yourself because you're trying to do too much and you're not getting the treatment and the health that you need. So let's go into what happened with the DUH. Okay, not the leader, but the Lea-DUH-ship. They never answered the initial call. They didn't respond until after several emails were sent out. And then when they finally did respond, the tone was condescending, if I heard it correctly. The tone was very accusatory, if I heard it correctly, and that they did not, in a sense, the employee felt like they weren't being believed, like their situation wasn't believed. And it also sounded like that the employee felt like the leader minimized their situation. If that's what you got, drop a comment in, because that's basically what I got. And because of this, not believing their employee, the employee felt motivated. And so you have to remember, from a leadership standpoint, if you want to get successful results, you want to do the opposite of this. You want to motivate, not demotivate your team. And so that's why I want to talk about active listening skills right now. And then they also stated that they couldn't use sick time. They had to have this time as unscheduled, like an unscheduled event. And yeah, so if you think about what the employee was already going through, and then the leader decides to give them an unscheduled versus the sick time, what does that do? Let me break that down. That impacts their money. So if I hear an employee is already going through family issues, there's a lot of chaos going on, the last thing I want to do is impact an employee's financial, right? Because if you impact a person's financial, what does that make people do? Right? If they were already at a 7, they're about to escalate to a 10 right now. Because when you impact people's money, they can't pay their bills. They can't, have gas. He's already talked about there's a life-changing event, so it sounds like he has to go to the hospital. They really, really need their money. And so I feel like this employee, this leader, manager or task worker, I want to call them, really just missed a lot of things. And the sad thing is that this employee said they had plenty of sick time. They had not used any vacation. They do very good at their job. It just sounds like they were just a really, really good employee, right? And I feel like a lot of leaders, sometimes we get so busy, I've had to stop myself, and we lump everybody into the same bucket. The ones who abuse sick time versus the ones who really work hard and really try not to abuse time. So let me read what active listening is so that you know what it is. Active listening is a communication skills that involves going beyond simply hearing the words that another person speaks. It's about actively processing and seeking to understand the meaning and the intent behind them. It requires being a mindful and focused participant in the communication process. Active listening includes all of these different techniques. So like I said, I hear car accident. If I'm active listening, they said life-changing event. I'm like, somebody's either about to die, somebody got paralyzed. That's the active listening, right? They talked about deed. A house is gone. Something's happening. Again, I'm like, okay, so what's the active listening? Someone has passed or is about to pass, or someone is in hospice at this time. They said that they're about to break down. If they said that they're about to break down, there are a lot of things active listening I have to think about. I have to think about EAP resources. I have to think about maybe even suicide resources, all these different resources because of what I'm actually hearing. So as a leader, you can't just listen to what a person says. You have to actively listen to comprehend what is really going on. Because when someone is under a great deal of stress, a lot of times they may just be bumbling. And so sometimes you have to say, okay, so if I hear you correctly, there was an accident and there's a life-changing event. Is that correct? Yeah, is that correct? I would ask questions back so I can make sure that I understand. And so what I wouldn't have done, and what I would encourage leaders not to do, if you had a concern with what was going on with this employee, because you have to remember, this is the employee's concern, right? But the leader knows everything about this employee. So let's say I had a concern. Maybe I see a pattern of Andy calling out on the same days or whatever. Still at that time, you have to separate all of that, because Andy disclosed way too many red flag triggers that can create a complete catastrophe. So right now is not the time to address those things. Right now is the time to say, hey, Andy, based on what I've heard on your situation, I want to give you this S prevention number. I want to give you some EAP resources. I also want to let you know in our perks, we have legal assistance consultations for free. You want to just hear some of the things that he's saying and give him all the resources that you think would benefit him at that time, because like I said, you didn't just listen to him, you actively listen to this person, right? So when you're actively listening, you're trying to hear what is the true meaning behind what this employee is saying. Again, what is the true meaning behind what this employee is saying? And I would say from over 20 years experience, after hearing this situation, I would say my employee is really having a meltdown. And so because of all the things that are happening, I would probably, as much as I would want him there and I would want his numbers, the best thing I can do is probably really talk about taking a leave of absence. That's really, to me, I would say this employee needs a leave of absence. He just has too many things going on. The car accident, the family not on the same page, the deed, he's about to break down. You know, that's just a lot. It's different if it was one situation. And then I would go to my boss over me and I would say, hey, let me let you know what's happening and what I'm going to suggest. I'm going to also reach out to HR and let them know also what I advise and see if we can partner to be able to really help this employee. Sick time wouldn't even be an issue. Unscheduled event, I'm not even thinking about those things. This employee needs an allotted time off from work because they're at risk at hurting themselves probably or hurting someone else. This is way too many negative things that are going on in one person's life. And guys, I have to tell you this is true. This is not fictitious. This is a very, very true story from this employee with their manager, just like the story that you guys heard the week before. You may be shocked to know that employees are going through this, but they really, really are, which is why a lot of people are branching out to start their own companies and start their own businesses. But we need people in staff positions too. We need great employees to, work for corporations and help corporations grow and assist customers, right? So, if everybody was an entrepreneur, we would have a lack of people working in these staff positions. So both of these things are very important. But I would encourage leaders, if you want to keep your people, sustain your people, and have good growth for your business, you have to actively listen. And as much as you want them there, if you hear a situation like such, this is when you want to get key people involved, like HR is a really good one. And then, let your manager know over you of what's going on to make sure that we are providing the right resources for this employee. And I tell you what, by doing that, if that employee decided to take the leave that we maybe would recommend or give them an option for, and then they can decide, when they come back, they're going to be a lot stronger. They're going to be a lot stronger. And then the one thing about employees, they talk, they run their mouth. So when you do the right thing by your employee and you really not just hear the words they're saying, but really understanding the meaning behind their words, this will start to trickle out in your organization. Oh my gosh, so-and-so did this. They're such a great boss. They're so da-da-da-da. And really, honestly, what could happen when you have a meeting with your team, you can talk to them about, hey, this employee needed to take off some time for personal reasons. Maybe we gather together and we get an action plan so that we can make sure that we're still successful with this gap. Don't look at employees as being disposable. Don't try to, get rid of employees and, and just try to expose them, and that talks about, I don't know if you guys heard in the news about the Alaskan, let me get something to drink, Airlines Flight Attendant. Excuse me. I was going to do an extra video for this, but it's a great point. There was a flight attendant. She was twerking, in her Alaskan Airlines flight attendant uniform She had just graduated. She had passed her probationary period. And I can tell you as a flight attendant, you're extremely excited to get past your probationary period because it's extremely hard to be a flight attendant, especially for Delta. Alaska is pretty tough too, from what I've heard, because they're one of the bigger airlines. And so when you get past those tough parts, you are really excited. And when her video went, and if you see the video, let me tell y'all, that wasn't a twerk, y'all. That was an irk. Okay, let's take the T and the W off. That was an irk. Okay, that was no twerk, honey. That was a tit, a tap. No, ma'am. No. Okay, that little tap, tap. But the video ended up going viral. Obviously, she's a pretty girl. And from what I understand, they fired her immediately. And I'm here to tell you, when you hire people and you fire people in less than 6 months, you have lost between $8,000 to $10,000. I'm not lying to you. Go talk to HR. You lose between $8,000 to $10,000. And if I have a leader listen to this, drop in the comment. So you would have to ask yourself, a lot of times corporations, we think, oh, just fire the person. We'll just go ahead and get rid of the person. Well, I'm here to tell you as a leader, you hired a person based on a skill set and for a reason. But what you cannot forget, also this employee is human. They're human. And imagine if you give just a little bit of grace, because they said she was on her probationary period, she was just getting off, and had she been there longer, they would have probably not fired her. So 7 months, 6 months, so a month difference. If she was here past the probationary period, we'd have just kept her. A lot of times leaders, what we do is we get these rules. And you got to understand that rules are just written by human beings just like you and me, which means you can change those rules. You got to look at every situation. It was her twerk. Go watch the video, you guys, and y'all drop in a comment. It wasn't that serious. I have seen and heard people do more gregarious things than that. And someone cared about them enough and kept them with the corporation. I've heard it with athletes. It's happened. People make mistakes. It happens every day. Stop making employees disposable and start listening to your employees. And also remember, leader, you didn't just get there for no reason. You weren't perfect when you became a leader. Somebody invested in you. Someone took you in a private room, talked to you about things you didn't do well and things that you could do better, and help you get you where you are. And we can't forget that as leaders. We can't forget that as corporations, that you hired this flight attendant for a reason, whether it was her personality, whether it was her customer service, whether it was her hospitality. And because she made that one mistake, let me just ask you, are your ticket sales going to go down for that irk? Because it wasn't a twerk, honey. I can show you a twerk, but this is a professional video and we ain't going to do that. That was an irk, okay? That was an irk. That wasn't a twerk. That was a tick. You know what I mean? Like, are the sales of Alaskan Airlines going to go down because of that? The answer is no. And I'm going to tell you why. Because when someone is loyal to your company, they're loyal to your company. And corporations need to start being loyal to their people. Now, if somebody's still, but I've known companies where people steal. And they've kept them around. But I think that's pretty out there. If someone's stealing from you, you do need to get them out because of the inventory and things like that. But we also got to give people the room to grow as well. Stop making employees dispensable. This is why people don't want to go and work for corporations. This is why people want to stay at home and rather work from home, because they don't want to deal with you, leaders. They don't want to deal with you. But if you start actively listening to them, this doesn't mean you let them get away. No, you keep them accountable. But when you keep them accountable, that means you've documented your situation. You've had conversations with them consistently. Not here, there, somewhere, everywhere. You've documented, you've had conversations with them consistently, and you're giving them things to be able to help them better perform. So the flight attendant with that, if I had had her on my team, obviously we would have had a very straight conversation. We would have had a very straight conversation. I would have asked HR, is there a way that she does a content creator? There's no way around it. Content, social media, it's all over the place. So for us to ignore that as a corporation is not smart. But is there a way that we can have her, if she's open to it, to apologize? Because her intent was not, and if I remember, she did a GoFundMe. She was already making over $2,000 because people, they're already supporting her financially because they didn't feel that it was right. Some people did. A lot of people's like, girl, you're in a uniform. You need to be professional, blah, blah, blah. And I get it. But we also are human beings. And because we're human beings, we are imperfect. And nobody got to greatness on their own. People get to greatness by investing in a person and saying, hey, you made a mistake. So now you got to hire someone else, which is going to cost even more resources because somebody made a quick decision, not understand the financial impact of that. And as leaders, we want to keep employees. We want to build those relationships so that it will help our numbers, our KPIs, our key performance indicators, our NPSs, our net promoter scores, right? But more importantly, we want to help them be the best that they can. And if you don't desire as a leader to want people to be the best and reach their full potential, then you shouldn't be doing the job. It's not always an 8 to 5 job. But it's not always a 24/7 job. I tell people there was a time in my career where I could only work 8 to 5 when my son was younger. But if you develop and train your team and put processes in places, you can actually work an 8 to 5 and not always have to carry the stress. So I hear a lot of people say, I don't want leadership because I don't want to carry that stress home. And I'm here to tell you, if you get a well-oiled working machine, you won't have to carry work home. You won't. You'll have a process in place and a very well team who doesn't even want to bother you because they care so much about you. They don't even want to bother you. They don't. So, Andy, I'm sorry about that situation. I really pray and hope that everything works out for you. I would encourage you to take time off. This is not a sick day type of situation. This is a situation where you need time off. Time off to work about all of those situations that you talked about. That's not a situation you can handle in a day. That's a situation that's going to take, at the minimum, I would say 2 weeks to almost up to 30 days. And I know that finances could be a concern. So we need to look into where you live at to see if you qualify for like disability or some type of payment through FMLA, depending on how many hours you've worked for the company, to see if you can get money for that. But I would not advise a sick day. I would advise you take some time off so that you can address those issues. And I just wish the best for you, in your situation. Also to the flight attendant for Alaskan Airlines. I'm sure it's a lesson that you learned from the situation, but I also too know how bad you wanted to be a flight attendant from the sound bites and the clips and the things that I was seeing online. And I'm sorry that this actually happened to you. And I hope that you will become great from this and learn from this and maybe go and help other people too from this experience. And for employees who have had this situation happen to them, I just want to say sorry. Sorry, because I know when you're already down and you're being kicked by the person that you go to work and you try to be the best that you can, because some people work for their bosses. There are some people who are very, very tied to who they work for. So when their bosses don't do right, it impacts them. And I know people are like, oh, that's just a man and that's that. We're all different. We're wired different. Some people really work based on the type of leader they have over them. So to leaders, that's why it's important. It's so important not to just hear your employee, not to just listen to your employee, but to actively listen. Take notes, write down notes, right? It doesn't hurt to take notes. Write down what you hear the employee saying and try to get the full meaning of where the real issue is. Let me give you an example. When I used to work in data technical support, there was a customer that had a concern. She was talking to her boyfriend online, kind of like a FaceTiming thing, but it was a while back then. And the Wi-Fi crashed down. She goes, oh my God, I need you guys to help me. My Wi-Fi is not working. And I was talking to my boyfriend. So what is the meaning behind her words? Is it the Wi-Fi, or is that she really wants to speak with her boyfriend? She really needs to contact her boyfriend. We don't know if he's in the military or anything. And that's where active listening has to come in. Some of you will just hear, oh, so your Wi-Fi is not working. Okay, well, let me get your account number and help you. No. I am so sorry to hear that it crashed while you were trying to talk to your boyfriend, because obviously if you're FaceTiming him, you guys are not in the same area. See, that's the meaning, right? That, you see what I'm saying? That's the meaning behind it. You got to think beyond what you hear. If they're FaceTiming, you got to think they're separated at this time. And that's the real concern. So is the concern my employee just wants to call out sick? Is that what it really is? Or is the real meaning is that my employee is really going through a massive life change right now, and we need to be here as a corporation, as a leader, to support them as much as we possibly can. And when you do that, leaders, that 2 weeks or week or day that they need off, most times they'll come back sooner, because they're so thankful and so grateful that you went above and beyond to help them. And so leaders in corporation, let's get people back in the office. Little things like this can win people back wanting to come in the office and work for you. And not only work for you, go above and beyond for you. Andy, you were doing a lot. I would tell you right now, slow your pace. Do your best, but don't try to overdo too much, because you have a lot and you got to think about balance right now, and that's not healthy for you guys. So anyway, guys, that is Lea-DUH-ship. Thank you so much for watching my very first episode. Please share if you find value. Please comment, subscribe. It really, really, really helps the algorithm, you guys. Have an amazing day, and I will see you next week. Thank you.